Alright, so on to day 3 of the 6-1 notes. This is 6-1b, part 2. You did the factors and the polynomials on the previous day, and today we will be working on graphing these. And by graphing, all we're doing is sketching them. You could graph all of these in decimals to double check your answer to see if it looks right, but I'm going to tell you a couple of helpful hints. Okay, the first of which is we need to find the zeros and plot those points. Okay, in fact, over here in the margin, I'm going to kind of write the steps. Okay, the steps, step A, we'll call it, is to find zeros. Okay, and if you remember, to find zeros, that's just solving it. That's basically setting each factor equal to 0. So by doing the opposites, if you remember. Okay, so this is x equals 3, -1, and 4. Okay. That's the first step. And I'm going to just go through and do another one at the same time here. What I want to accomplish by this is I want to do kind of one of each type of problem. I guess you'll kind of know what I'm talking about after I get there, but let me just do this one here. This has, matter of fact, I'm going to do this one on the end. This has x-intercepts of 0, 5, and remember, if I set 4x minus 9 equal to 0, what would I do first? I would add the 9. And then I'd divide by 4 to get 9/4. If you need to, that's 2.25. Okay, that'll make sense in just a second why I'm actually reducing that. Let me go back to this first problem. I'm going to just plot my zeros. So I got one at 3, I got one at -1, and I got one at 4. Okay, that's the next step, is to plot them. Okay, now with that being said, I mean that's kind of within it. So maybe find zeros and plot on graph. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing over here at 0, all the way over here at 5, and then at 2.25. Well, 2 is here, 3 is here, 25 cents would be like a quarter, obviously. So I'm going to put it right there. Okay. So all I've done for these two problems is just plot my zeros. Okay. The next step is step B. Determine multiplicity. Okay, of each zero. And again, what I mean by that, what I mean is whether it's odd or even. Okay? Whether it's odd or even. And for every single point, I know before we said when it was 1, we'll just leave it that, but there's a reason I want to do this. When it's odd, so this, when there's nothing here, there really is a 1 there, even though you don't see it, so that's odd. This has an odd exponent. This has an even exponent. And the reason we do that is because if you remember from before, when it's even, it bounces off the 0. When it's odd, it goes through the 0. So the next step to be able to graph these is determine total power. And by total power, I mean add up exponents. Now that's only on this page. On the next page, it'll just be given to us. But when they're in factored form, I've got to count how many I would have. If I were to FOIL this out, I'd have an x squared. If I were to FOIL this out, I'd have an x cubed and an x. So I'd add 1 plus 3 plus 2, and total power is 6. Similarly, on this one over here, there's nothing on any of them. So this is really x to the first, that to the first, that to the first. So these are all odd, all of them. And the total power is 3. Okay, so what you'll notice here is I've got a total power of 6 and a total power of 3. One's an odd total power, one's an even total power. So this gets kind of, where do we start the graph, where do we end the graph? Okay, and there's two parts to this. So this is kind of C1. If it's even, if the total power, let me underline total power here, if it's even, okay, then it's same. And by same, I mean it's either, if it's positive, which you can see this is not positive, this is negative, that's positive, that's negative, that's positive, and I just mean that in the front of the whole thing. If it's positive, then you start up and you end up. If it's negative, then you start down and you end down. Okay? So with that being said, we can graph this first one. This one has an even total power. So I'm starting over here on the left side. I'm not going to start up here because it has a negative right here. Negative. So negative means I got to start down start down here somewhere, and I need to end down here somewhere. Okay, if I start down here, I'm going to come up to my first 0, which is at -1. I can see -1 is odd, so I need to go through that. I'm going to go through it. I don't care how high up you go. I'm going to come to 3, and 3 is also odd, so I'm going to go through 3. And I'll come down a little bit here. It doesn't matter, again, how low or high you go. We're not asking for maximum or minimums here. We're not asking for where it's increasing or decreasing, because we don't know what that is. That could be here, it could be way up here, it could be right here. Then at 4, it's even, so I need to come up and bounce off, and look, I'm ending where I should be. Okay. Last year, I did not put the negative on it. Look what it looks like. It started up and ended up because I didn't have a negative in front. Okay. Just another way to look at it. And that's it. That's my graph. I'm done. Okay. Now for number 8, I got to give us a little more down here. You can guess it. 2 would be if it's an odd total power. Then it's opposites. What do I mean by that? I mean, if it's positive, like it is for our example in number 8, then it's down, up. In other words, it starts down, ends up. And if it's negative, it starts up and ends down. Now here's the easiest way to kind of remember these. If it has an even total power, think of what an x squared function looks like. An x squared function looks like that. It's a parabola. Okay? Parabolas start up and end up. So if it's an even power, it should start and end in the same place. If it's an odd power, it starts in 2 different places. Now how does that work? Well, what we don't remember probably is what x to the third looks like that. And it starts down and ends up. So if it's, again, in this case, this is going to be a total power of 3. So I'm going to start down here. I'm going to move this over a little bit here, and end up here somewhere. That's where it should happen. And again, with odd, 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 I go through every one of these. So I'm going to go through it, I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to go through it, and sure enough, I end where I needed to end. And there is that graph. Done. Okay. Now what's it asking down below? Where are my intervals, my positive and negative intervals? Well, positive intervals, again, are above x-axis, and negative values are, again, below x-axis. It's really just look at this. From negative, and we start over here at negative infinity. It's based from my zeros. My first 0 is -1. So from negative infinity to -1, it's negative because it's below the line. Okay. Whereas then the next part, from -1 to 3, it's above the line. So that's positive. It's below the line for the next part. So from 3 to 4. And then again, from 4 on, it's also negative. Okay. Looking similarly at number 8, this should start to get a little bit more routine. From negative infinity to my first, which is at 0, it's negative. Then it's positive from 0 to 9/4. Or if you actually wrote 2.25, that's not wrong. Then from 9/4 till I get to 5, it's in the negative realm again because it's below the line. And then after that, from 5 to infinity, it's all going to be positive. Now I've done those 2 problems. What I'd like you to do is pause it, try 6 and 7 on your own, and come back and check. What I'm going to do is just start working through it. I'm not going to do a whole lot of talking, but I'm going to be explaining it too while I go. But please try it on your own. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. One is negative, one's positive. Keep in mind of that, and make sure you're checking your total power. Okay, so I've done all my zeros, I've determined even or odds, I've find my total power. My total power is even, so again, even is the same, and because it's positive, I'm going to, well, let me actually pull out my points here. I'm going to start up, and I'm going to end up, so I know that. I'm going to start up here at -1. Now keep in mind, I know 0 is here, but that's not 0, that's -1. -1 is here, 0 is there, 1 is there. So the only thing I need to bounce off is this 0 right here. So let's go through -1. Let's come up and bounce off a 0. because that's an even root, and then I'm going to come up here like so, and it's the Wu-Tang symbol. Maybe you don't know what that is, but someday you will. On the next problem, again, I'm going to plot them again. I've got the same zeros, but they're all odd. And again, the total power is odd with a negative out front. Well, let's look. Odd, negative, starts up, ends down. So that better be how it works out in the end. So I'm going to start up. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to go through it. And sure enough, I end down where I need to end. Okay. Positive and negative intervals. I'm going to do these fairly quickly. This is positive. Let's see. From negative infinity till I get to -1, then it's negative, then it's negative again, and then it's positive for the rest. For this one, the positive interval is again from negative infinity to -1, then I'm negative, then I'm positive, then I'm negative. Done. Okay. Now the back page works very similar. Okay. The back page works very similar, and what you're going to see here is, well, first of all, the writing, it's a little weird, but we can make this work, okay, is that it's in polynomial form already, which means we need to find the zeros, okay, and to do that, it says right at the top of the page, we're going to factor each polynomial to find the zeros. And the first thing I would say is pull out the GCF, and the GCF, so again, here, the first step, okay, it's very similar, but we're going to take one additional step here, is to factor. And I'm putting here GCF because that's the first thing that you should think of is the GCF. So the biggest number that goes into each of these is 2. I can also pull an x out of all of those. And when I divide a 2x out of here, the 2's go away. I cancel out one of them there. I'm left with x squared. 2x out of there, those go away. And that goes away to give me x. And 2x out of here gives me a -6. Now you need to recognize, and this is why we did all that factoring, that this is x minus 3 and x plus 2. Okay. Now, what are my zeros? Well, actually, I don't know why I wrote y equals here. I guess probably because that's what I was going to do with this. Okay. And my zeros are at 0, 3, and -2. Now keep in mind, those are not in order of how you're going to graph them. I also need to, well, you can kind of imagine, so find zeros. That was my step 2. Step 3 is determine multiplicity. Let's just call it determine even odd, which is what multiplicity is. Okay. So 0, well, they're all single roots, right? This is to the first, to the first, to the first, so they're all odd. Okay. Plot my zeros. Okay. Find zeros and plot. I should probably put that up there. So I've got one at 0. I've got one at 3. I've got one at -2 right there. Okay. And again, from the previous page, so D is total power. My total power here, I don't have to do any thinking. It's 3. Don't add these up. These aren't in factors form. This is a polynomial that is a cubic polynomial because it's cubic. It's cubic. That one's quartic, right? So this is total power TP3. And so that tells me, again, let's maybe rewrite this so you have it. If it's even, it's same. So if it's positive, it should start up and end up. If it's negative, it should start down and end down. And if I have odd, then it's opposite. So if it's positive, then it looks something like this. And if it's negative, then it should look something like that. So what I need to know is this is odd, and it's positive in the front, so I should start down and end up. And sure enough, if I go through it, through it, through it, there it is. Done. Okay. Where am I positive and negative? Well, I am positive where it's above the x-axis, and I'm negative when it's below. So this should be fairly simple. The first one is negative, this positive, negative, positive. Done. Okay. I'm going to do another one. Maybe I'll at least get you started on number 10 here. What I want to do here is factor out a negative x. So I'm going to factor out a negative x out of each term. I'm left with x squared plus 6x plus 8. I can factor that further to x, let me just write that here, x plus 4 and x plus 2, which gives me zeros at 0, negative 4, and negative 2. And again, these are all odd. Okay, I think you can plot them, and hopefully you can try and see how this looks very similar to this one, except this negative in front should give away that I'm going to start in the exact opposite direction, and I should end in the opposite direction. 11, I'm going to have you try on your own too. 12, I'm going to kind of start for you as well. 12 is not as bad as it looks. We can factor out a 3x squared out of each one of these. If I pull a 3x squared out of here, I'm left with x squared. If I pull a 3 out of there and an x squared out of there, I'm left with minus 2x. If I pull a 3x out of here, I'll just tell you it's 15 total, which gets me to 3x squared times x minus 5, x plus 3. Okay. And then, what does that give me? Well, I have a 0 at 0, 5, and negative 3. And the only difference is between this and all the rest of them is this is even there and odd on the other two. Okay. So when I go to graph this one, I am going to graph this one for you. 0, 5, and negative 3. When I go to graph this one, again, it's an even, so I should start up and end up, depending on if it's negative. If it's negative, I would start down and end down, but it's positive. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to go to negative 3. It's an odd, so I'm going to go through it. At 0, it's even, so I'm going to bounce off it. And at 5, well, it's another funky looking Wu-Tang symbol, or W if you prefer to be just normal. Again, when I talk about my positive and negative intervals, that's easy because I know where it's positive, because it's above the line to negative 3. Where it's below the line, which would be negative 3 to 0, and 0 to 5, and then where it's positive again on that. Okay. Take a second, try to finish up number 10, try number 11 on your own. Keep in mind number 11 is very, very similar to like 9 and 10, particularly 9 if you just factor one thing out first. Look for the GCF, and then come back and check your work with mine. It's negative in front, and it's an odd power, so TP3. This was TP4. That's why I knew I had to start even and even. This is TP3. So on 3, because it's negative, I look at odd, negative. That means I have to start up, and I need to end down. So if I do this and odd on all of them, I'm going through it, I'm going through it, I'm going through it, and there it is. Done. Okay. Positive and negatives. Okay, and then for the last one, I'm going to factor an x out. That factors to plus 4 minus 3, which gives me 0, negative 4, and positive 3. Plot those points. And again, I'm going to start down, end up, because it is a positive cubic. Through, done. Again, start labeling my things here. Let's see, the first one is negative. And I'm all done. Your homework will be, for this section, will just be the 5 through 8 and 9 through 11. So really 5 through 11. If you start, please, you can just rip this off and look at what I said in the margin over here. It walks you through everything you need to do. Same thing on the next page. Everything in the margin here tells you what to do. The first page is like the first page of the homework. The second page is like this page of the homework. Walk yourself through it. You can do this. See you tomorrow.